Hi, my name is Sam Mattel. Welcome to Self-Advocacy in Action. Today, our guest is Anne Hunier from Housing Opportunities Made Equal. Anne, do you want to tell us a little about your organization?
Certainly. Housing Opportunities Made Equal is a civil rights organization that's been around since 1963, fighting discrimination in housing and housing-related services.
What is discrimination?
That's a very good question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, for our audience, we are also friends as well as co-workers in the fight against discrimination. Discrimination is when people use their prejudice, which is like a preconceived notion about what somebody is going to be like, to decide how they're going to treat a particular group of people. Generally, it's denying them opportunities, and in our case, the kind of discrimination that we fight is discrimination in housing. Unfortunately, not all discrimination, not all treating people differently is against the law, but discrimination in housing, just like in education or in voting or transportation, is against the law, and the laws that protect us from those things that people do to discriminate are called fair housing laws. And sometimes we call ourselves also a fair housing agency. But fair housing doesn't mean a lot to people unless they know that fair housing means the opposite of discrimination in housing. So that was a long roundabout answer to a pretty simple question.
Yeah. I have another question for you.
Sure.
What do you think about discrimination against people with developmental disabilities in housing?
In housing? Well, what do I think about it? I think it really stinks, first of all. You know, I wish people wouldn't do it. I think that people with disabilities in general get discriminated. You know, there are three groups of people that get discriminated against the most in national statistics. One of them is race. People get discriminated on the basis of race. The second is families with children, and the third is people with disabilities of all kinds, not just developmental disabilities. And disability, as you know, by law means anything that impairs one or more major life activities. So in addition to developmental disabilities, it also includes mental illness. It includes HIV or AIDS, former users of illegal drugs, as well as your, more physical impairments. So people tend to discriminate against, one of the major reasons that people discriminate is out of fear, I think. Webster's, the dictionary, defines prejudice as like a fear of the unknown. That's one of the definitions. And so I think that if people aren't sure how to treat people with developmental disabilities, they've maybe never met them, or they think that they're going to have a lot of extra work to do, or they're going to inadvertently offend someone that they would just prefer to avoid the whole thing, which is really unfortunate. So I think that that's one of the reasons that people discriminate against, in housing anyway, against people with developmental disabilities. So, I don't know why they discriminate against, probably the same reason why they discriminate against them on the job, or, they're just not sure because they've lumped them in a group of people, and it's sort of crazy to lump everybody with developmental disabilities into one big thing and say I'm going to discriminate against everybody with developmental disabilities because there's so many and such a range of abilities in that,
Okay. How about, let's say I'm discriminated against as a person. How should I respond? Because I have a developmental disability. Should I respond in an angry way, or what should be the response?
I can't tell you what your emotional response should be. Some people feel hurt, some people feel angry, some people feel like they want revenge. But what I am here to say is that There is a way to respond legally to discrimination. You know, supposing you were denied housing, for example. If you went and a landlord perceived that you had a disability and pretended, for instance, that housing wasn't available, or told you that you couldn't live on a certain floor because you had a disability, or tried to charge you extra money because you had a disability, all of those reasons are, you know, examples of the kinds of disability that you might face. How you would respond to the landlord on the spot, you know, might be armed now with your legal rights that I'm telling you, you know, you can tell them that's against the law. Sometimes landlords think that they can do that because you don't know your rights. You could say nothing and go away and report it to Housing Opportunities Made Equal, who would investigate your claim and find out what you wanted to do.
Or I have that piece of paper right there that says, "You're breaking the law."
Right. Or you could have, a piece of paper that says you're breaking the law and just give it to them.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of different ways to respond. And I think sometimes people respond by taking it inside. And that's what I would hope that you don't do. Sometimes people respond by saying, you know, he's right. I am kind of difficult to live with, and maybe I don't deserve to live here. That is what I would not want anybody to do. I think when you start looking for housing, or when you think about your housing situation, you want to start with the idea, is this housing good enough for me? Not am I good enough for the housing or the landlord. So when somebody discriminates against you, it should be, you know, a surprise and shock and, you know, and standing up for your rights. But not everyone is available or able to stand up for their rights, and so we have to be extra careful to be able to advocate for people that might need our help doing that. But it's always, your first response is, you know, call home for help and let the landlord know that they broke the law.
But as we know, there's a lot of people, even if they're nonverbal or they have intellectual disabilities or whatever, they have a right to advocate for themselves.
They do have a right to advocate for themselves, and some ways that they might do it is a sign that says that you broke the law. Some people bring someone that is verbal with them if they're nonverbal, that will, you know, talk to the landlord. But then you don't want to get into a situation where a landlord stops talking to you and starts talking to your friend.
That's true.
You know,
Very
because
true.
one of the ways that people discriminate against people with disabilities is to simply overlook them.
I know.
You know, and treat them like they're not even there. You know, who's renting the place? You or your friend?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that, you know, we need to be sensitive to is that the first response should be by the person, you know, who faced the discrimination. It's their choice. They may not want to fight it at all. But then, you know, we ask them, do you want me to say something? And if they say no, then we don't. If they say yes, then you say, what do you want us to say? Now, do you have a question or can I go on?
You can go.
Okay, because we've been talking about what if somebody denies you housing, and that's just one form of discrimination. Another form is what if the landlord starts asking you a lot of questions?
Like, do I have to build a ramp on the house?
That's kind of an honest question in a way, because, you know, and they shouldn't ask it, but they might say something, you know, even more insensitive, like, you know, what's your disability? Some kind of dystrophies don't look, you know, people don't look disabled. And there was, in fact, a woman that had a mental illness that went into an apartment building, and she was with somebody, she was coming out of transitional housing and with a caseworker, and the person at the rental office said, what's your disability? You don't look disabled. Now that's discrimination right there.
Right.
Then they said, you're the fourth disabled person to come in here this week. That's discrimination
Yeah.
also. And then to ask you all kinds of questions like, do you need medication? Do you take medication for your disability? What
Totally.
happens if you fall down the stairs? I'm not going to be responsible if you...
Reliable.
Right, exactly. I'm not going to be liable for you if you have an accident or, all of those kind of things where they're not actually denying you the housing, but they are being extremely intrusive and hurtful with their questions and insensitive. And those are all examples of questions that are against the law. What they should be asking is, they should be saying, hey, Sam, you want the apartment? Well, show me you can pay. Mm-hmm. How do you make your money? Didn't I see you on TV? Mm-hmm. And show me that you get a steady amount of money and enough money to pay my rent. And show me that you didn't burn down your last place or wreak havoc in your old apartment. Yeah.
Like how do you can sit there and go, how do you think you will pay for this apartment or this house?
Right, and there should be an application. And the application should say, how much money do you make? Mm-hmm. And then the landlord can say, show me a pay stub or something that shows me how much money you make and that it comes in on a regular basis. As a landlord, I want to know you can pay for my apartment.
Mm. But as a person with a developmental disability that I know, that there's grants out there that help people with developmental disabilities to afford an apartment.
Right,
or a house.
And I should consider that income. Now, some landlords will say, I only want someone that works. And as a person with a disability, you might then say, I don't work, or, I only work part-time, but here's where my other income comes from. And then a landlord should consider all of the income together. If they don't consider things like SSD, SSI, or other, income that comes directly to people that have a disability as income, they could be discriminating, and I would say that they were discriminating on the basis of disability, even though they weren't flat out denying you housing.
What do you feel about society? Like people with developmental disabilities being discriminated against not only in housing, but in society?
You want to know what do I think of people with disabilities being, developmental disabilities being? Well, I know that this is, even though it's public television, I'm not allowed to swear, right? But that's my first response. As I said, I don't like it. I think there's no reason for it. I think that it makes just about as much sense as discriminating against any other group of people. What if you wanted to discriminate? I mean, it makes no more sense to me than discriminating against someone on the basis of their race.
True.
And that makes me pretty angry as well. I'm trying to choose my words as to not offend anyone.
Because it's a tough question.
Yeah, I don't like it, and I have pretty much devoted my life to helping people understand why they do it and helping people understand that they don't deserve it and helping people understand what their rights are and how they can respond to it. I think it's a two-way or more than two-way. I think that people with developmental disabilities are individuals. Those individuals probably discriminate against other individuals. And I think that people that don't have developmental disabilities discriminate against people with developmental disabilities and a whole lot of other people. And everybody discriminates against everybody else, and I think there's no reason for it. I think the way to fight it, though, is to start realizing why you think differently about a group of people and then start correcting the behaviors that stem from that. And that's what I'm here to help people do.
Right now, we're just going to take a little break, and we'll be right back. Thank you very much. Hi, this is Sam Mattel. I'm just going to give you some information if you have any questions or comments about the TV show. Our phone number is 674-6300, extension 3170#. And we would like for you to give us feedback on the TV show, what you liked, what you want to see on the show, and stuff like that. If you have email, you can email me at Sam Mattel at frontiernet.net. And if you want to mail us a letter, that would be 1200 East and West Road, Building 16, West Seneca, New York, 14224. Again, just give us your comments and your ideas for future television shows. Thank you. Bye. Welcome back. Today we're talking about discrimination with Anne Hunier. Welcome back.
Thanks.
Yeah. I want you to know, this is a very interesting topic to me. And my next question is, people with developmental disabilities that live in group homes have had issues with people in their neighborhood not wanting people with developmental disabilities in their neighborhood, to put the group home in their neighborhood, and they don't want that. I'm gonna get what you feel about that.
Yeah, our organization is, of course, against discrimination of any kind. And as I mentioned before, it doesn't just mean denying someone housing as an individual. It can also mean trying to create zoning laws to keep certain kinds of organizations like that serve poor people or people with disabilities out, and it can mean, flack from the neighbors too. There's a phenomenon that we call NIMBY, which means not in my backyard. And people feel sometimes they're afraid, once again, of people with disabilities of all kinds, because they honestly don't know what to expect. And so they think it's the old thing that if people that we don't know, or maybe we don't like, or we don't, that we've heard things about as a group, but we're not sure of, move into our neighborhood, then our properties are going to go down and we're not going to be safe. And that is absurd. And really, one, you have the legal right to be there, and you should know that. And two, there might be a lot of education that we have yet to do about developmental disabilities so that people understand them better and understand that it's not a threat. And it's very strange when you have a disability to say, hey, I'm not threatening, because, you don't feel threatening, but, some people might look at you and not want you in the neighborhood. So why is that? Well, it may be because they've never met anyone with a developmental disability, or because, they have certain notions about people with developmental disabilities that are untrue. And so the way to combat that is education, but also not to undermine the importance of enforcing the law. If a landlord is discriminating, or if people in a neighborhood association are discriminating, there's two things to keep in mind: education and enforcement. If they are doing something against the law, whether or not it's from ignorance or, they still need to know what the law is and the consequences that they could face. So I think there's a two-pronged approach to responding to discrimination, and it's one that our agency has always taken. And I am more on the education side, or, I wouldn't be here talking with my friend Sam. But I think that private landlords also discriminate because of fears or, not quite understanding what their role is in renting to somebody with a disability. They might think, for instance, I've had landlords ask me, what if won't my insurance go up? What if someone with a mental illness, burns the house down or goes off their medication and starts threatening? Am I going to be liable for that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And my response is, you're as liable for the behavior of someone with a disability as you are for any other tenant.
Right.
What if first of all, you don't know if any of your other tenants have any disabilities, because they may not have disclosed that to you, and you can't tell by looking. And secondly...
Unless you have a wheelchair.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is that, you can't always tell. If somebody, disability includes so many things that you can't tell if someone has a disability.
That's true.
And then the other thing is that's why you have homeowners insurance. And that'll cover everyone, whether, the whole idea of fighting discrimination is that you treat people the same. You treat someone with a disability the way that you would anybody else. The only time that would be different is if that person that had a disability asked you for something. And that's called a reasonable accommodation.
Now,
Go ahead.
Let's get into that.
All right, let's do it. What if you need an animal, for instance?
Yeah, what if you need reasonable accommodations?
Yeah, if you need a reasonable accommodation, first of all, you have to be the one to ask. Or somebody on your behalf can request it. And the accommodation has to be reasonable. The example that I like to give not to try to make you laugh or anything, but, is that if you need some kind of a service animal, people have all kinds of service animals now that help them with their disabilities. Mostly what people think of is a guide dog, but there are many other kinds. And a landlord has a no pets policy. You have a right to ask for an exemption to their policy because you have a disability. The landlord can't ask you if you need help. You have to ask the landlord. Now, if you ask them to have your guide dog with you, the landlord can't charge you extra. They can't say no, and they can't say we don't, accept pets because it's not considered to be a pet.
Right.
They can ask you for proof that you have a disability and that you need that particular accommodation because of your particular disability. If you tell the landlord you need 9 pot-bellied pigs, that's not reasonable, and you probably don't need them. But if you need to have a service animal of some kind, then that would be reasonable. And the same thing if you need a ramp or to lower a cupboard or a light switch or, keep things where you can reach them. A landlord might think, well, shoot, I don't want to do all of that because it's going to cost me a lot of money. Actually, it's going to cost the person with a disability some money. The landlord can't deny you the opportunity to do that, but they don't have to pay.
And there's also grants that would pay for that.
There are grants, and people listening that might want to do that should know that, they could contact you and you'll help them find the money to do that. But the landlord is not liable to do that. And that's one reason that one advantage of public housing or federally funded housing is that in those cases, sometimes they are actually liable to make those changes. If you live in private housing, however, the landlord does not have to make them. They just can't refuse you the opportunity to make them.
Right. But I know in new buildings, okay, like my apartment building that I live in had to do renovations to the apartment. So they had to put a few wheelchair accessible apartments into that apartment building. And,
all buildings built after March of '91.
Yep.
Or that underwent major renovations after March of '91 have to have accessible apartments in them. They have to be not just accessible apartments, they have to have an accessible building. So that means more than just your apartment. It means if they have a laundry room, you have to be able to get to the laundry room.
Yep.
It means if they have, a common area. You need to be able to maneuver a wheelchair through the common area. So one of the things that our organization has done in the past, when we had the funding, and will continue to do when we have our funding restored, is we will go out and test different apartment buildings and find out, are you accessible? And if you're not, and you're supposed to be, we will pursue it. We'll contact you first, but if you don't go along with, making it up to accessibility standards, we're going to pursue it further with the federal government, and you're going to pay a lot of money. People have been paying $250,000 to $2 million to what they call retrofit the apartment because they didn't comply with what they were supposed to do in the first place. So you gotta figure, like, if there's people that have accommodations, that live in homes that need accommodations, they should be able to go to their service coordinator, or whoever helps them, to get these accommodations done. Right, and we can help do that. We can help them, we can help the service coordinator. We've developed a form so that somebody with a disability can just give it to their doctor, and their doctor can send it to the landlord, and it's all taken care of. So, not to allow an accommodation or a modification is considered discrimination, and we would help with that. And if you need help, then you can call us at 854-1400, 854-1400, or get a hold of us on our website, get more information on our website, which is www.homenewyork, that's HOMENY.org.
Well, I would like to thank you for coming on the show very much. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me. Anytime.
For the audience, I will see you in a little while. Just have a nice day. And keep on advocating for yourself and other people. Thank you.